a brand new month, the month of March it is. Welcome to it. You are tuning into the news desk right here on television, where we inform, impact and inspire you. Right, plenty on the go within this hour as we try to make sense of all the developing stories that have been transpiring within the African soil, and as well as globally, as we are asking the question this evening, as we know that a lot of developments have been happening. 0.6% of growth GDP has been announced by the Stats SA this afternoon. But is this really a greater shift? And we will try to look into which industries contributed into this increase that we are seeing within the GDP growth that we're seeing within the fourth quarter as well. We are also going to be looking into the heartbreaking case of the missing 6-year-old Joshlin Smith. As we all know that she was kidnapped even last year, and now that case is unraveling in the Western Cape. Shocking revelations about his mother's lack of emotions when she was asked about her child's whereabouts. And we are going to be trying to analyze that and try to make sense of it all, give you also a sense of what transpired within the courts, and also give you a breakdown from what has been transpiring, especially within those courts there. Looking at the fact that these co-accused have pleaded not guilty in the court proceedings, and we'll try to give you a wrap and also analysis around that. And then across the Atlantic, we move to another power struggles that we've seen, that Trump and Zelensky were in an office mishap, where we saw that it was supposed to be a meeting, and we saw there was a few of exchange between those words there, and we try to make sense of it all. That is this a strategic push for peace, or is this just another political chess move that would cost lives even at the battlefield? To try to make sense of it all. And then later on, I'll be joined by our Africa correspondent Sean, as we try to make sense of everything that is developing within the African continent. As we also know that Sam Nujoma has died, and he was buried this past weekend. We try to make sense of the legacy that he lives. Also, the West African missions withdraw from Guinea-Bissau, and also Sudan's RSF signing a new charter in Nairobi. What do these shifts mean for Africa's political shifts? We want to find out. We also need to know what is definitely transpiring within those cases, and we definitely want to hear your viewpoint on that. But before we continue with those conversations, let me bring you the whole question that we are asking you this evening. Definitely has to be about pushover bosses and pushover leaders that we are seeing even in this case going forward. We know that Trump and Zelensky were a bit in a turmoil that we saw happening, and Trump has definitely ordered that there should be a pause within the US aid to Ukraine, or after the Oval Office clash with Zelensky. When faced with a powerful leader or pushy leader, how do you respond? You have 4 options there. I want to find out from you. Do you stand your ground? Do you negotiate strategically? Do you stay diplomatic? Or do you walk away? You have 4 options there. Go to all our social media platforms using the hashtag The News Desk with Television 360. That's where you will find us for more on these and other developments. That and more coming up on the Tuesday edition of The News Desk. Welcome. This is The News Desk. Very good evening to you. Welcome to it. You are tuning into the news desk right here on television, where we inform, impact and inspire you. Reporting live from Johannesburg, Soweto, I am Kagiso Sithole. Let's start with the big stories this evening. The big story definitely has to be that South Africa's GDP has definitely increased in the previous quarter. South Africa has shown an increase of 0.6% in the third quarter of 2024. But the big question is this GDP growth the one that we have been always looking out for? Does this bring much more shifts? Or we know that South Africa's economy has managed to step aside a recession, but let's be honest, 0.6 growth isn't as much as a win when millions are still unemployed, and we are really moving forward in this case. Are we definitely going into finding that South Africa's GDP will be in a much more percentage growth that we are seeing there? Or is this just a minor victory in a long run or economic struggle that we are seeing? I mean, also we are looking at the fact that this GDP comes after as we know that the unemployment rate has dropped within the previous quarter, and the Statistic General was taking out some of the sentiments. They're talking about the fact that South Africa has narrowly avoided a technical recession, with Stats SA reporting a 0.6 economic growth in quarter 4 of 2024. This is the modest improvement, some analysts might say, into this, but nearly not enough to tackle the unemployment that we are seeing even in this case, and other developments that we are seeing being revitalized even in this case. And most of the people were talking about the fact that what does this mean, especially when it comes to the unemployment rate, when it comes to other industries that were definitely affected into this. And a reporter from the EWN was tracking the story and has some of the finest details about what really transpired there. Let's listen in.
Yeah, quite right. Our estimates for agriculture is an expansion of over 17%, which gave us 0.4 of a point. We also saw strong growth from finance and businesses, and then trade, and mostly the retail, wholesale, motor trade also made a positive contribution of a 0.2. But as always, there are some industries that contracted, most notably mining and manufacturing. But across the board, the contractions were relatively small, so the impact on the overall GDP was either a very, very marginal negative, or maybe a 0.1 of a percentage point.
Right, definitely there. That is a reporter from EWN. Just reiterating some of the words that where does this in growth and increase come from? He stated that the agriculture, forestry and fishing industries that were underperformed in quarter 3, but they have bounced back even in this quarter. The finance, the real estate and business services sector also contributed positively, but it wasn't as all good news. Transport and manufacturing at this case were struggling sectors to kind of increase the GDP to go into its turmoil that it needs to move over. Dragging overall performance down is the transport there, and the Statistic General, they're just announcing that what does this mean for the average South African? What does it mean for me and you, the ordinary South African, that the GDP has increased by 0.6%? Expert says that while this growth is better than a construction, it's still far from the 3 to 5% needed to make a real dent for the unemployment that we are seeing, especially young people. A majority of the young people in South Africa find themselves unemployed even in 2025. And with even this GDP increase, it still doesn't tackle the unemployment that we are seeing there. The GNU has promised economic revival, but will this growth be enough to restore confidence within their leadership? As you know, even that the budget speech was postponed, in February, and to move to March the 12th, as we are seeing that even some of these political parties are still not having agreement within all the parties that are involved. They're still not knowing which ground to stand on, rather, and that is what we are seeing. And even with this back and forth, and there has been cabinet meetings that we have been seeing throughout the past weeks ever since the postponement, but the cabinet are very sure that on the 12th of March, the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, will stand at Cape Town City Hall podium to give the budget speech from the Government of National Unity. Let's not forget the elephant in the room, which is also load shedding, right? With Eskom's ongoing struggles, many are asking, can we sustain economic growth when businesses are still battling power cuts? Yes, a lot of township businesses are battling the crippling that we know that recent weekends we experienced load shedding stage 6 that kind of ended around on Sunday, and then we're also showing it being reduced to stage 4 and then reduced to stage 2, and then later on it was suspended, as Minister of Electricity Kgosi Enso Ramokgopa has reiterated that this is just a fear force for us to try to tackle the crippling power battles that we are having in our country, right? Drop your comments in the comment section below how you view this increase of 0.6% in the third quarter. Stats SA just releasing those stats of the gross domestic product data that was released out there. Is the economic growth a step forward for justice survival, or is this just another survival mode that we are seeing within our country? However you view it, go onto all our social media platforms using the hashtag The News Desk, and you'll find us at Television 360. All right, let's move over to another story that has definitely caught our attention this evening. Definitely, it has to be a story that has been, we've been seeing happening throughout the past year, which is Joshlin Smith's, mystery abduction, or where did she go? Because, even today we are still asking ourselves that where did Joshlin Smith go even today, right? The court has been finding out the disappearance of a 6-year-old Joshlin Smith from Manda Bay, pardon me for the pronunciation, in February 2024 shook the country. Now, as the trial unfolds, shocking details are coming to light. As we all know that the police officer that was actually investigating this was there at the scene and saw that Joshlin's mother was not emotionally attached to her child gone missing. Smith and 2 others charged with kidnapping and human trafficking related to Joshlin's disappearance from the middle post in Saldanha Bay in February 2024, and the court proceeding have started. And another thing that has been shocking into this is that the fact that the type of court that they used, as we all know that the multi-purpose center has been declared and set aside as the high court for this proceeding. Some of you might be seeing photos going around social media around the type of court proceedings that we are seeing, the type of setting rather of where the court proceeding is taking place. Yes, it is a multi-purpose that has been set aside for people to be able to join in, especially the community to be there. I'm going to take you into some of the scenes and live proceedings that have been happening throughout today's court proceedings at Joshlin's there. What we know so far is that the co-accused have pleaded not guilty even in the scene. Let's try and listen in to some of the court proceedings that happened this afternoon. All right, having some technical glitch there, but definitely will bring you that audio around what had transpired within Joshlin's case there, and what were the proceedings. Okay, I see that the audio is here. Let's try to listen in. All right, that is just a taste of what has been happening within the court proceedings there. As we all know, video courtesy of SABC News, and Judge Erasmus is the preceding judge there at this case. Joshlin Smith, as mother, Kelly Smith, and 2 accused were charged with kidnapping, human trafficking, and the state witness, Constable Yanga Ngongota, testified that Kelly showed no emotions when reporting her child was missing. Even Joshlin's grandmother, Loretta Yarn, reacted to this disbelief, saying that as a mother, if your child is missing, you should be in distress. But Kelly, nothing is shocking. That's what the grandmother of Joshlin also was reiterating, the fact that this is quite shocking that there was no remorse in her being asked about the whereabouts of her child, and that's why we are seeing her sitting against those stands as well, being also one of the accused even in this case. The trial is now focused on whether Joshlin was sold, trafficked, or harmed in some way. And even when you listen into some of these court proceedings, you find that even on the day of Joshlin going missing, there was a whole lot of incidents that were happening there. People who were there, sitting there with the mother as they were drinking and using drugs. Even there, some reports are saying that they were under the influence of alcohol and also under the influence of drugs there. And we might never know that was Joshlin sold, or was Joshlin trafficked, or was it harmed in other way? And even today, is Joshlin still alive is another question that we are asking. That is Joshlin still alive wherever she is, or Joshlin is nowhere to be found? Will we still find some of of her body and some of remains even at this court proceeding that we are seeing, right? I'm trying to hook you up with the very latest report from Newsroom Africa's Nasipi Same, who was there at the live proceeding of the court today, and just breaking down of some of the findings that she found. Let's listen in.
These two officers were, one could say that first responders receiving that complaint on the 19th of February 2024, the day Joshlin disappeared. However, they were on the evening shift, and they just relaying to the court as to what exactly happened on that day, the various locations that they went to look for the people that were inside that shack. He did indeed say, or rather, Officer Gobese did indicate that Jacqueline Apollos had said to them when they were inquiring about Joshlin that they were inside the house during the day. Himself, Steveno, accused too, and Renshia, who the state last year withdrew charges against, and he had indicated that they were smoking drugs. Joshlin was playing outside, and at some point, Renshia did indeed ask Joshlin to check on her child in her shack that was not too far from where they were enjoying themselves. But I am joined by NPA spokesperson.
All right, that is Nasipi Same, Newsroom Africa's reporter, who was live there at the proceedings today. Just reiterating the fact that on the day of Joslin's disappearance, we are seeing the fact that they were enjoying themselves next to the shack that they were there using alcohol and other substances. But the real question, and the question that is on everyone's mind, is the fact that if a mother does not react to the child's disappearance, what does it say about her involvement, right? If a mother, I believe that a mother will always have instincts towards their children, and if ever you do not find any emotions or find any remorse, it brings a question to say, what is your involvement actually into this? Are you part of the adoption or the kidnapping of your child? But with this trial continuing, we'll be following every development, but we want to hear from you. Definitely, I want to hear from you. I like to hear from you. What is your take on this? Use the comment section there below, or you can go onto all our social media platforms and continue the conversation using the hashtag #TheNewsDesk. At Television 360 is the handle that you can find out on. That Smith, Joslin's mother, saying the fact that and the other two accused are charged with kidnapping, human trafficking, and related to Joslin's disappearance from the middle post in Saldanha and Bay in February 2024. And we are seeing that happening at the Multipurpose Center in Western Cape, which has been declared as the High Court for this case as we proceed as a move forward. All right, let's give you other stories making international news further afield across the Atlantic. We all know that the past weekend we saw Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky crossing some exchanging words that were not as great as we all know to be, as we all know that there has been a lot of reactions and misreaction from across world leaders saying the fact that Zelensky needs to apologize to Trump, as well as Trump needs to apologize to Zelensky. But so far what we know about this is the fact that there has been a political power play that is unfolding. Donald Trump has paused U.S. military aid to Ukraine following a heated confrontation with President Zelensky in the Oval Office. I wonder if you managed to kind of get a hold of that clip where you are able to hear some of, the exchange of words that we saw between Donald Trump and Zelensky even there, where we saw that even the deputy president was also saying to Zelensky that even in this session, did you ever apologize? And that is why we are asking you a question in our poll question that we are asking you this evening, is that how do you deal with pushover leaders? All right. And you definitely have 4 options there. As Trump orders a pause on U.S. aid trade, how do you deal faced with pushy and domineering leaders? How do you respond to that? You have four options there. A, stand your ground. 2, negotiate strategically or stay diplomatic, or you can even walk away. However you view it, go into all our social media platforms or even on our stories using the hashtag The News Desk and weigh in there in some of those options. We want to hear from you. As I did say, I like to hear from you, and what is it exactly that you find yourself hearing even in this case. All right, I'm trying to get a hold of some of the proceedings that happened there at the Oval House in case you didn't have a chance to listen into it. Let's take a listen to it.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You
and all
haven't been
the-
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you can...
Very interesting, words of choice that we are seeing between the two presidents there, as we're seeing that, according to reports, we know that this aid freezes comes after the critics against that. Trump is strong arming Ukraine into negotiation that could favor Russia, effectively forcing Zelensky into losing a battle. But others believe that Trump is making a strategic move to push for diplomatic resolution rather than endless war. And as we're seeing in some of these, exchange of words between the two, we are seeing that Trump is saying that just say that you are going to sign the deal, and Zelensky just saying that what security does it have for my country, and he was forcing the fact that what security does it have for my country? Do you stand your ground as a leader? And we saw that Zelensky was standing his ground there, and a reporter, David Smith, a correspondent from the US, was in a conversation with Clement Manyatela on the Clement Manyatela show, and he was there at the Oval House when this altercation happened, and he is kind of describing the scene as some of what a power play between the two presidents. Let's listen in to some of the findings that he found.
Conference that never happened, and then gathered with more than 100 other reporters to watch Zelensky of Ukraine drive away. And not long after that, Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican, came out and described this as an absolute disaster. And he's a Trump loyalist. He was putting the blame on Zelensky, even suggesting that maybe he should step down as president of Ukraine. And this is the same Lindsey Graham who has been a Russia hawk for years and lavished praise on Ukraine. And that was typical of how the reaction in Washington has been very divided, with a couple of exceptions. Republicans have generally rallied around Donald Trump and said he showed great leadership and he's putting America first, and Zelensky was rude and should have been grateful and so on. But on the other hand, the Democratic Party have been united in condemning Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance as an embarrassment and a disgrace. They've said this was one of the most shameful episodes in the history of the American presidency. They're questioning why, not just that day, but earlier, Trump appears to be siding with Russia against Ukraine and its democratic allies in Europe, and so you also think.
Yeah, definitely. That is U.S. correspondent David Smith there, who was at the Oval House when this altercation was happening between President Trump and Zelensky there. And also looking at, as I was, researching and looking at this clip, it also started when they were criticizing the attire that Zelensky was wearing. As we all know that Zelensky was very vocal about the fact that he's going to change his dress code until the war ends. He's not not going to be wearing suits and all that, whilst his country is going through a very crazy turmoil that we are seeing there. And definitely they were criticizing him. Even one of the journalists were asking there to saying that with what you are wearing, what is it that you are wearing? Couldn't you dress up even better for the White House? And that's where this whole thing just altercated, and then it kind of pushed over to saying that JD Smith also involving there, talking about the fact that why didn't he was he ever grateful in what ever since the aiding came through, was he ever grateful to what the president has offered to them? The stakes are high. Ukraine's risk losing crucial resources while global allies questions America's commitment to defending democracy. The big question is this Trump pushing for peace, or is he playing hardball with a country fighting for survival, right? Is he trying to play chess games while people's lives are at danger here? People are losing their lives. People are dying at this. And this aid should be the ones that, helping. And this has been something that we have been seeing with Trump. He also spoke about South Africa a few weeks ago, talking about that he's cutting aid across South Africa for AIDS and HIV and AIDS programs. As you all know, that he's saying that some of the leaders have dealt in corruption scandals, as well as the land expropriation deal that we are seeing. Even the AfriForum flying into the Oval House to try to make negotiations across that some white minorities are being discriminated in South Africa. And these are some of the allegations that we are seeing, that Trump is cutting and pausing aid in other countries that are helping and developing, and what does this mean? At the cost of what? At the cost of other people's lives? Is this what this means for him? That his new leadership, him being back at the Oval Office, this is him stripping, food out of people's mouth. This is him stripping aid and finances that will help people grow, that will help communities grow. I wonder what is his strategy on this. And also, I wonder what you think of this. Let me know your thoughts by using the comment section there below. Also going through all our social media platforms using the hashtag The News Desk at Television360. That's where you will find us. The question that you will answer definitely has to be, should leaders use financial and military aid as leverage for diplomatic conflicts? Because I'm thinking that this is lives that we are talking about. People are depending on this, and we are seeing that he is definitely cutting aid because things did not go according to the way he wanted them to go. That's another thing that is saddening about this fact, that things didn't go the way he planned to go, and that is why we are seeing that there's a huge reform into this case that is happening there. I want you to take you back again to that scene, to also just give you another sense of some of the developments that happened there as we wrap up the big stories.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Sure. First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you. But you have nice ocean and don't feel now. But you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
You're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what
you're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a...
All right. Trump saying we are going to feel very good and very strong. I wonder what his plan according to this, and what is he trying to achieve in definitely cutting aid in parts of the countries that he's been cutting. South Africa has had its pinch with the HIV and AIDS saga, and now we're seeing the Zelensky, also the Ukraine aid there. And I'm asking that should leaders use financial and military aid to leverage diplomatic conflicts? It's a very tragic one that we are seeing, that you are taking food out of people's mouth and aid that's supposed to help. And that brings me to the poll question that I'm asking you this evening. While Trump pauses orders to aid the Ukraine after Oval Office clash with Zelensky, when faced with a pushy or demurring leader, How do you respond? You have four options. Do you stand your ground? Do you negotiate strategically? Or do you stay diplomatic? Or do you walk away? However you view it, go on to all our social media platforms. That's where you'll find us at Television 360. That is where definitely you'll find us for all those comments and all those reactions. All right, you are up to date with all the big stories that have been transpiring throughout the day, but definitely news don't stop. More news on you on the go as we go into the African continent, as we try to make sense of other developments that have been happening across the continent, such as Namibia bidding farewell to Sam Nujoma, and also also the political turmoil that we are seeing happening in some parts of Guinea-Bissau, as well as Sudan's RSF signing a controversial charter in Nairobi. And Sean will be joining me. Our Africa news correspondent from Malika Africa is joining me now. Without wasting time, it's time for Africa in View. Indeed, it's that time of the evening where we zoom in into the African continent's biggest stories, unpacking politics, everything that has been transpiring there. And major key developments that we are seeing is the RCF deal being signed in Nairobi, and Guinea-Bissau's, kind of looking at missions withdrawals as well, and also looking into Namibia as they were bidding farewell to one of its founding members. And to do this is our African news correspondent from Malika Africa. Sean, a very good evening to you. It's always a pleasure to have you as we look at sharp focus into everything that has been happening within the African continent.
Yep, good evening, Kagiso. Very nice to speak amid all the chaos that is breaking in all corners of Africa.
Definitely. Let's begin here, right? We are seeing the fact that Namibia this past weekend has said goodbye to its former founding members, and a lot of analysts are seeing that this is an end of an era when we are seeing African leaders who fought for democracy and also for freedom within the African continent. What is your take on, his death and the legacy that he leaves behind?
Yes. The passing of Namibia's founding president, Sam Nujoma, who I guess led the country into independence from South Africa back in 1990, what was apartheid South Africa, and ruled until 2005, marks a turning point for the nation, as it is also a time for reflection as the country looks back to what it has achieved in about its 35-year or so tenure of independence, and even marks, I guess, a new turning point further than what was already a turning point in the first place when it inaugurated its first female president back in December.
And as we're looking at this, I mean, the Nujomas, the Mandelas, and other leaders who fought for, the freedom of Africa, and now looking at the fact that, there has been a lot of shifts in terms of, the leadership that we have currently. Do you think that the leaders that we have currently in Africa still share the same vision of trying to bring freedom and liberation in Africa?
It is somewhat difficult to say, and in some ways you would almost say that even the Mandelas were the last of a crop, because, for example, the Sam Nujomas and the Nelson Mandelas came from a place where their countries were technically independent from European rule, as far as being Europe projecting and ruling outwards from Europe. Yeah, but they were still under the subjugation of Europeans in Africa. Yeah, that had settled and made colonies. So, which is why I guess we had the opportunity to celebrate them as quote unquote founding fathers, despite their countries gaining freedom in the 90s. But as far as those go, many of them are long past. So, for example, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Seretse, and so on and so forth, because most of the African countries gained their independence and freedom back in the 60s and late 50s and so on and so forth. So I guess they're already a dwindling bunch. And when it comes to the current crop, some would say they may take some of the freedoms that were so hard fought for granted and have found themselves in a state of complacency.
Definitely. And there needs to be a change in leadership's perspective, in sense that we're moving Africa forward, because the Mandelas and them, they played their part in kind of shaping Africa, and it's up to the now generation to also kind of change that. Let's talk about what some of the developments that Nujoma brought into Namibia.
Yes, so I think largely what he did is, I mean, in many ways, allowed the country to form an identity away from what was an apartheid state, and even, I guess, have its own name, because Namibia was actually initially named Southwest Africa, but only renamed it thereafter. To some degree, it actually also advanced some of the urbanization of the Windhoek and allowed the local Namibians to be able to find more prosperity, with Namibia actually having one of the largest and highest GDP per capita of any African state, and also started to work towards restitution and even basically rectifying the harms that were committed against Namibia in the past, such as being one of the main voices for the acknowledgement of the horrors that were done at the hands of Germans in the Herero Nama genocide in 1904.
Yeah, interesting that we're seeing that leaders who've played a very interesting role in making sure that we are in the Africa that we are seeing now, even though there's still quite more development that still needs to happen. And to those who are tuning in, we want to find out from you, is Africa's new generation of leaders giving up the legacy of liberation heroes, right? As you can leave all your comments and on all our social media platforms using the hashtag #TheNewsDesk. Other developments that we're seeing as we shift gears into West Africa now is that we're seeing that Guinea-Bissau is back in the headlines. The Economic Community of Western African States has pulled its mission from the country after months of tension with the President Umaro. What has led to this decision?
I think Guinea-Bissau finds itself to be another country that has had a tumultuous history since being one of the late comers to independence. Guinea-Bissau was under the conquest of the Portuguese, who were actually amongst the last to leave Africa in the 70s. So actually later than much of the French, Belgian, and British that left largely in the 60s. And ever since, there's been a lot of back and forth as between where and how much democracy it has been able to exercise. And they operate under something called a semi-presidential system that, because I guess even in the ambiguity that you hear within that statement, has led to a lot of infighting between the presidency and parliament. And as a result of that, it has been unable to basically oversee successive peaceful transfers of power. And now when it comes to what is currently happening now with President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, who took office in 2020 and promised basically not to run again, or is now finding himself delaying elections late into the year. So whether it's September or November. And the ECOWAS mission that was trying to mediate has found a lack of success in trying to do so and has had to withdraw, which is actually starting to form a trend of failed ECOWAS missions, as it already tried to also intervene in the coup that transpired in Niger in 2023 and also had to withdraw from that effort. So not a good sight to see as far as West African cohesion goes and as far as the health of Guinea-Bissau's democracy.
And Sean, what does this mean for the people living there, and as well as the delaying of the elections? Does this mean that there's going to be certain laws that will not be processed? There will be certain finances that will not be processed. What do you think is the take on this?
Yes, so I think largely what is at risk is freedom and personal liberties as far as that is concerned. And in many ways, Guinea-Bissau not actually being so far from the Sahel. has, in some ways, the President Embalo has tried to use the cover of insecurity to justify a lack of democracy, as I guess following the trend of what has transpired in other Sahelian states. And with that, I mean, it has stifled business going on as it would, and obviously frozen investor funds because of the precarity that is currently the country is currently held in hostage within. And then furthermore, we are also seeing Russia extend its influence even more across West Africa, as the president recently met with Vladimir Putin to discuss potential economic and security operation. So Russia is definitely taking this opportunity to further entrench itself across West Africa.
Seeing Russia helping other countries, whereas they are attacking another country. But that is a story for another day. You mentioned before that we've seen it happening in Niger, and we've had coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. Could Burkina Faso be the next one that we are seeing with these, the history of these military coups and political velocity, seen as such a worrying trend for democracy backsliding in Africa?
Yes, especially as far as the regional trend goes, because if you look at it, there's something people and geopolitical analysts like to call the Sahel Belt, which has now also started to be called the coup belt, which is where there have been successful coups going as far, literally going as far east as Sudan, and now Guinea-Bissau would connect it from what was as the Red Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. So if you go from Sudan, next up is Chad, thereafter is Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now with Guinea-Bissau, you'd have actually cut a line across Africa's forehead of coups and failures and hiccups in democracy that have transpired in the continent. And this area, largely being just south of the Sahara Desert, is becoming an increasing eye of the storm that has befallen the fall of democracy in Africa, which is actually quite concerning to see, despite some of the justifications that may be made as far as the coups being a result of failures to address insecurity within what is inherently a somewhat bureaucratic institution that comes as a consequence of democracy. But whether it is justifiable to suppress the tens and millions of constituents of these countries in the pursuit of said security, I guess, is still up in the air, and even the legitimacy of said security risks in the first place.
Sean, is ECOWAS still the stabilizing force that they are, or are they losing influence within the region?
They have lost significant influence in the region, especially after failing to intervene in Niger, now currently withdrawing from Guinea-Bissau. The AES, Alliance of Sahelian States, that formed as recently as, I think they ratified their declaration last year, have already issued their collective passports. Yeah, so making it ease of movement across Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger just much more seamless. And with that in mind, it is rendering ECOWAS more and more powerless by the day, by the hands of others who are divesting from ECOWAS, and even ECOWAS's own regional failures to provide stability and a path forward.
I think some leaders need to go back to the drawing board, to find strategies on how they can still stay as the stabilizing force within Africa, because that's what definitely we need. But finally, let's talk things Sudan now. The Rapid Support Forces have signed a charter in Nairobi, Kenya, signaling their push for legitimacy. Walk us through what this means.
Yes. So, following actually what was a defeat by the Kenyan nominee to the AU chairpersonship in February, I believe 16th of this year in Addis Ababa, shortly after the paramilitary group RSF were welcomed to the Nairobi capital, the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, during which happened over a week or so, and at the end of which, on February 22nd, the RSF signed a charter to declare the launch of a government of peace and unity that would govern all the areas currently in its control, areas which actually reportedly make up around 60% of the Sudanese nation's population. So a very concerning sight to see overall, especially from a insurgent group and a group which has actually seen many war crimes, and from a military conflict that has seen over 20,000 dead and 40 million people displaced, and to see Kenya be the host of such disruptive forces not only decreases its legitimacy within the global international scene, but also the African one so soon after it vied for basically the mandate of the entire continent.
Very interesting developments there. But Sean, let's not forget that, the RSF has always been accused of war crimes, mass killings, and also human rights violations. So how does this move play out on the ground?
Yes. May I ask if you mean on the ground for Kenya or on the ground for Sudan?
Let's say for both.
Okay, so starting with Sudan, it puts more pressure under the Sudanese armed forces, which are currently fighting the RSF, to also legitimize their own constituents and constituencies, because basically what also transpired that led to the war breaking out in the first place is that the two generals, Hemeti and Burhan of the SAF, Hemeti of the RSF, jointly were the generals that allowed for almost a democratic panel that would see the elections come through, and then they violated that, and then the RSF was to be absorbed into the SAF, but Hemeti was unwilling to join that, and therefore from that, I guess, broke out, and so on and so forth. So I guess the ball is now on the SAF's courts, and when it comes to how it transpires on the ground, unfortunately, in Sudan, much of Sudan's mineral wealth is under the control of the RSF, and the Sudanese government has therefore lost out on much of its revenue from gold mining, although the gold mining itself and the gold mining industry has actually seen record high profits despite civil war going on. So when it comes to who is profiting from this, it makes it look like RSF is exploiting the instability to smuggle gold out of the country, gold that is now alleged by the outgoing former Deputy President of Kenya, Rigathi Gachagua, who actually only got impeached in, I believe, November of last year, so less than 3 months ago, who accused the President of Kenya, President William Ruto, of working with General Hemeti to smuggle gold from Sudan through Ethiopia, and down to the Nairobi, and flown out to countries such as Dubai to smuggle it out. And the Middle East Eye also says and reports that from 2012 to 2022, around $112 billion have been pocketed by the United Arab Emirates from gold smuggling from Sudan. And when you look at those dates, 2012 to 2022, that is even prior to the war breaking out. And with also when you see the connection that the UAE is accused of not only supporting the Sudanese RSF, but also the militants in Ethiopia, and then now the president of Kenya, you suddenly see that there is clearly a supply chain starting to form here, where you go from Sudan to Ethiopia, and then to Kenya out of the Nairobi Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. All this supported by the testament of the former deputy president, literally the second person in command in Rigathi Gachagua. Rigathi Gachagua that actually welcomed Hemeti, the leader of the RSF, when he visited Kenya, and was welcomed by a state visit in 2023. So again, a very damning sight to see indeed.
A very damning sight to see indeed. So basically, Sean, what you're saying is we are seeing Sudanese losing, its ground, or we are also looking at the fact that we are going to see Sudan having a future where it's run by warlords instead of elected leaders.
Yes, so that is currently what is happening, because you start to see that the both generals violated the terms of their treaty, because in many ways it is easy to solely castigate the RSF as basically as the aggressors and so on and so forth, but actually both generals, both Al Burhan of the SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, and Hemeti of the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, violated the terms of the treaty that was supposed to lead to a democratic election upon the ousting of al-Bashir. And then, therefore, we are now seeing basically the assertion of military rule. And yeah, it's simply just a sad sight to see for a country that fought so hard to oust their last militant ruler.
Definitely. Sean, you are a Kenyan national, what does this mean for Kenyans as well? And, for just an ordinary, citizen there, what does this signing mean to them?
Yes, so actually, the signing of the charter was met with much protest in Kenya itself, a country that is starting to form a bit of a reputation for said protesting. However, it was also sad to see them essentially being rolled out a red carpet. The charter was allowed to be signed in the Kenyatta International Convention Center, which is named after the country's first president, with a statue of him to boot, and it is the largest conference center in the country. So there is no room for any claims that this was done, for example, under the cover of night and, in some back streets and so on and so forth. No, it was actually signed in quite literally Kenya's premier convention center. And to see our state administration endorse a group that has actually been at the hands of so many atrocities, I guess further cements what actually many Kenyans actually said was a deserved loss, in Addis Ababa for the AU chairpersonship. But even beyond that, I guess it's some sort of, a spit in the face as far as caring for how we care to present ourselves, as far as even caring to pretend to be aligned with, for example, whether it would be democratic values or human rights and so on and so forth. At this point, it is now completely shameless.
Completely shameless indeed. As we wrap up our conversation this evening, Sean, with the stories that we have been tracking from, Sam's funeral and legacy that he lives, as well as the West Africans crisis that we're seeing as well as the signing that we're seeing happening in Kenya, how does this shape Africa's political landscape and the future of Africa?
Yes, so I think with regards to all these, we're basically looking at countries which are still figuring out the baby steps of democratic rule at different stages. So Namibia gaining independence in 1990, the Guinea-Bissau in 1974, Kenya, although in 1962, only ousted its dictator in Daniel Arap Moi in 2002, and from then on became a vibrant multi-party democracy, only now to succumb to some kind of despotism, under its current president, who has now endorsed the Sudanese insurgent group that from which actually now ousted al-Bashir, who was ousted in 2019. So we're looking at very recent dates. We're looking at 90s, 70s, 2019, 2002. So the training wheels, as far as rule goes, have been taken off, because for all intents and purposes, on paper, the Europeans have left, right? But in terms of Africa finding its own feet and learning to work for itself, I think it is very clear that in all corners of Africa, there's still some way to go as far as that is concerned.
There's still a huge way to go in Africa, especially when it comes to freedom and making sure that we are, definitely developed as a continent at large. Sean, it's always great and a pleasure to have you share insights on these stories that shape Africa and getting your insights on these, and definitely important to keep a close eye on them. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, thank you again, and see you soon.
Thank you so much indeed. That is Sean, our African news correspondent, who is live from the UK. He is just reiterating some of the African stories that we are seeing, So we have signed an MOU with Mulika Africa that bi-weekly we'll be bringing you Africa in View for us to give you a sense and some critical analytics in every story that has been transpiring within our African continent. Please do go onto all our social media platforms and make sure that you use the hashtag #TheNewsDesk, that you'll find us at Television 360 on all our social media platforms for you to engage on all our conversations that we have been having, right? And that is our lot for the Tuesday edition of the News Desk. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your time. David Simach saying that good job, guys. Thank you for information. Watching live from the United Kingston as well. Thank you so much for reporting also live from the UK, David there. It's always a pleasure to bring you developments and everything that has been happening within South Africa and the rest of the world. Don't forget that this episode will be on our feed in case you've missed it, or you can go onto our Spotify. You can find us at Perspective, and for you to listen for some news on the go. On Thursday, we'll be back again to give you some incredible conversation. We'll be taking a look at the fact that there has been a lot of protests happening within our universities, and we are definitely seeing that this might be another case of fees must fall that we are seeing. And we are going to be joined by voices of the youth organizations as representative as we try to make sense of it all together right here on the News Desk. Don't forget to show up and making sure that you do give in your comment or give in your 2 cents on all things that we have been talking about. You can also head over to our YouTube page for more news and other information, or go onto all our social media platforms. You can find us at Television 360 because we're giving you a 360 round of everything that you need to know. Thank you so much. That's our lot for Tuesday. Have yourselves a fantastic evening. Until we meet again, look after yourself, stay informed, take care, and good night.